We are the sickest country in the developed world and spend 3 times more on healthcare costs than Europe and are bankrupting the country. Food companies have the top scientists in the world doing literal experiments to hijack our evolutionary biology to make us want to eat more. The food pyramid was really deliberate. The food pyramid was lobbied for by the food industry, which, it's important to remember, was the cigarette industry. Processed food to be the base of the pyramid. So there's a very deliberate system that's been put in place through clear corporate capture of our regulatory systems.
Our healthcare industry, it's not healthcare, it's disease care. It's like these people study sickness, not health. The only thing they're taught for the most part is how to diagnose a medical condition and how to prescribe a synthetic drug.
The lack of self-awareness that the medical system still has is breathtaking, and it's not going to work. I mean, fire the bureaucrats, reform the NIH, reform the FDA, reform our medical codes. Obviously, that's what we need to do.
Hey everyone, Dr. Axe here. We have an incredible episode for you today. We're going to talk about something that could literally change healthcare forever. And if you've ever felt like you're doing everything right, eating healthy, doing what you're told, even what the government tells you or your doctors are telling you, and you're still struggling with everything from metabolic issues, brain fog, hormone imbalance, then I've got a conversation today where we're going to be talking to Calley Means. Calley is one of the leaders of the MAHA, the Make America Healthy Again movement. He's an insider turned whistleblower who used to work for the same food companies and pharmaceutical companies that were keeping Americans in the dark. And now he's coming out and bringing things to light that are going to help you experience an incredible health breakthrough. And there are so many gems we're going to dive into today on what you can do to take back your health and to help America take back its health. You know, there are so many jaw-dropping facts I know that he's going to share today in terms of what ultra-processed food is doing to us, what RFK's agenda is, and how he's going to change healthcare forever. I'm so excited to have Calley Means on today. Calley, welcome to the show.
Oh, great to be here.
Well, I know we had an opportunity to march together, stand together at the Kellogg's headquarters, and it was such a incredible time meeting you there. And one of the things I have just been so impressed by is your boldness to speak the truth. You know, you've been on so many different outlets. I watched Tucker Carlson recently, and Joe Rogan, and some of the other things that I know you and your sister have appeared on. And you seem to have such an in-depth knowledge about what's actually going on in the FDA, in the food industry. And one of those reasons I know that you shared is that you were actually in the food industry. I mean, you actually saw behind the curtain and sees what's going on there. What are some of the biggest surprises or things that kind of shocked you as you were working within that industry?
Yeah, I think it's what I'm seeing now, even as Bobby's coming in, is that there's a complete and utter hand washing of responsibility for health, and it's all about an economic argument. I mean, literally, today what the food industry is arguing about, what policies about cleaning up the dyes or cleaning up certain chemicals that are banned in every other country. They argue that's going to hurt jobs and that's going to hurt food prices, basically raise food prices. And they use that as a threat, this kind of economic argument. They don't even deny that our food in the United States is extremely unhealthy, that we formulate our food with much less healthy ingredients than any other developed country. And they don't even understand that that's a problem. So going back to my time, 12, 13, 14 years ago, the goal of the ultra processed food companies is really akin to a drug dealer mindset. It's how do you make the food as addictive and palatable as possible. That's, I think, the real issue with all these chemicals that we talk about, these 10,000 chemicals that are in our food that aren't allowed in Europe, is the chemicals to me represent a science experiment where food companies have the top scientists in the world doing literal experiments to hijack our evolutionary biology to make us want to eat more. They're not trying to kill us and they're not trying to poison us, but they're trying to make food addictive and cheap. So there's just incredible innovation, quote unquote, that's happening where literally like salt is too expensive for food companies. So they create new ways to make a salt taste that's like totally just engineered ingredient. They're just trying to make everything cheaper and do these experiments to make it just highly palatable. So, in their own interests, I guess that makes sense. I think they've lost really a moral clarity on what they're doing. But I always say it goes back to the 90s. You really look at the inflection points as the 80s and 90s with the food pyramid. But I always say, and this is important to understand, I think, to unwind this process, the food pyramid was really deliberate. The food pyramid was lobbied for by the food industry, which, it's important to remember, was the cigarette industry. So when the food pyramid was created, 50% of the U.S. food supply was the cigarette industry. And R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris actually bought up most of our food supply in the late 1980s and 90s. And they added a ton of chemicals to our food to make it addictive, and then lobbied for carbs and basically processed food to be the base of the pyramid. So I just think when we talk about where we are right now, we need to be honest with ourselves that there's a very deliberate system that's been put in place through clear corporate capture of our regulatory systems.
Yeah. Wow. I think that, the fact that the cigarette companies had such an influence on the food companies is, I think that's pretty eye-opening. And one of the things you've done a good job of, and I think this is something that RFK has such a deep understanding of as well, is how you have people who had worked for pharmaceutical companies, who've worked for the FDA, who then work for government. I mean, this sort of cross-pollination of these relationships of people that are basically setting up situations where, supporting each other and doing ill will to the public is kind of crazy. And then when somebody calls that out, they're called a conspiracy theorist, which is just crazy to me. But that's one of the things that starts to happening. And I know that one of the initiatives that Bobby has, that you and your sister have, is to start to change the leadership. I'm a big fan of leadership as a topic, as a something that people we should focus on as a country. Is what does good leadership look like? And one of the things, if you read any really high-level business book, or someone like Warren Buffett will tell you, the fastest way to change something is to change the leadership, the people at the top. Is that something that you guys are very conscious of? I know you and Bobby, in terms of what needs to be done right now.
Yeah, and I think just as we're recording right now, it's just breaking. The head of the Human Food Program at the FDA just resigned, and there's a ton of, his name's Jim Jones. And there's a ton of breathless news articles right now about how tragic it is that Bobby Kennedy is leading these, scientists to have to resign, and it's just an attack on science. It's like, this is really important to understand. It's like, this is what people voted for. This is what must happen. Jim Jones, who led food policy at the FDA, who's been talking for 15 years about better labeling and has done nothing, who's overseen absolute devastation of American health, who's taken no leadership on the GRAS standards, where literally he said in a testimony before the election that he does not know how many chemicals are in our food because they don't have a recording of that because the FDA doesn't even know. This person who's just completely and utterly failed, the media is crying for him that he resigned and saying it's an attack on science. This is what we voted for and what has to happen. It is completely and utterly delusional and irrational to look at the state of American health right now and the state of American food and not obviously think that we should clear house of the career bureaucrats who have overseen this system. And I think this is something we all need to understand. There's going to be endless articles about how changing personnel is an attack on long-term government scientists. They have failed, and the media should be crying for the health of American children. They should not be crying for government bureaucrats who are going to be cleared out.
Yeah, one of the ways that I think about this, Calley, is if we look at this from a business perspective, government is essentially, in a way, in part, it's a big business. Now, government is supposed to be our protectors primarily, right? They're supposed to be the people protecting us, but there is a business element here. And that's, can you imagine somebody that had failed as bad as those in government have, specifically in the food industry, keeping their jobs? I mean, when you look at the statistics of childhood obesity, childhood diabetes, cancer, heart disease, metabolic disease, how much it's risen since the 1970s, it's staggering. And the fact that it's just continued to get worse, and then people are saying, well, this person has got an absolute F. They've failed everybody. They're actually killing our kids, not intentionally, but they are. The fact that they're trying to fight for them to keep their jobs is It's insane. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, everyone talks about having a business mindset in government. It's like, running a startup myself. The kind of lessons from going to business school. The cliches is all about the team, and I can tell you that's true. Anyone who's run a business can tell you that it's about the team. And I was recently on Twitter or X. Somebody was bellyaching that they were let go from the HHS. And she said, this is an attack on scientists. I've been a dedicated servant, And then in her bio, she has a link to this ultra progressive group that's calling Trump a Nazi. And it's like, people kind of bash Trump for having this loyalty pledge that he, people wanting loyal people around him. It's like that's any business in the world. You can't have senior leadership outwardly, publicly, subversive to the agenda of what the leader's trying to do. I mean, Bobby's trying to re-slant our health system to prioritize disease reversal and prevention, to prioritize transparency, to fight for the health of American children. And these, folks at HHS have overseen an abject record of failure. We are the sickest country in the developed world and spend 3 times more on healthcare costs than Europe and are bankrupting the country. It's like, it's an utter society collapse level disaster that we're seeing in our health systems. If Trump and Bobby Kennedy weren't brought in right now to try to fix this, I think we'd be in a real problem. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree. One other thing I want to point out that's just so important, when you look at the topic of leadership, there's Joko Willink has said this on numerous occasions, and that is the single greatest factor in a team winning is trust. And the thing is right now, it's like, can you blame? I mean, it makes absolute sense for Trump to say, I want loyal people around me, because again, if you want your team to win, there's got to be a level of trust. And there's never been greater mistrust statistically in the government and our doctors today and our whole medical industry than today.
Yeah. This idea, diversity is our strength. I labeled a bit. Of course, the team should be diverse in many ways, but there should be a homogenous mission alignment, and there should be homogeneity in what the organization's trying to do. If a senior employee is not aligned with the agenda of the leadership, that's a dysfunctional organization. So it is just obviously correct for Bobby and President Trump to have a team that is not, trying to get their next job at a food or pharma company and not doing the work of these industries that profit from people being addicted and sick, but to have a team that wants to pursue the MAHA agenda. I mean, that is just so basic. And again, I think, every institution is basically tied and incentivized to propagate the system that we currently have. I mean, the broccoli lobbyists and the grass-fed meat lobbyists are not funding the media. The media is funded by the pharmaceutical and the processed food industry. So the media is going to constantly attack Bobby and President Trump for clearing house the HHS with these breathless stories about, attacking science. But when you step back, it's just obviously what needs to happen. Obviously, like, what would Bobby be doing if he didn't start with personnel? So, it's an imperative for American children. So, nobody should be surprised that there's going to be some shakeups.
Yeah.
It's an imperative.
Yeah. So Calley, we've talked about how sick our kids are today, and just the rates of childhood obesity, the rates of autism is another one. I was watching a video, and one of the things I think that there was a video I watched with Bobby that I think it was the most I'd ever really just been a fan of him in my entire life. He was talking about the crisis with autism today and the numbers and how staggering they are, and how one of the biggest reasons why he had been praying to God for 20 years to be in this position is so he could help these kids that are suffering with these obstacles, these mental obstacles that you have, and many other obstacles when you have ASD or somewhere on the autism spectrum. And I don't think I'd ever heard somebody in government talk as passionately about and heartfelt and actually truly genuinely, because there's a lot of people actually today fake crying, but he was truly moved by deeply wanting to help our sick kids today. And what's been your experience in working with Bobby Kennedy in terms of who he is as a person and what his, real mission is behind the scenes?
Oh no, he's a warrior that's been put on this earth for that mission. And I think what was so shameful during the campaign and the confirmation hearings is that opponents said that things like he wants sick children, that Bobby wants kids to get sick, and measles and mumps and rubella are going to come back. It's like, let me just say something really clear. And I think this is obvious to everyone watching, with the brain and seeing this. His intentions are some of the purest, I think, of any public official in America. He does not need to be doing this. He, is a Kennedy and has a nice life. He has, estranged himself from friends and family to do this. He believes that he's put on this earth to push this, and he is absolutely telling the truth when he says that he's prayed on his knees every day to be put in a position to reverse childhood chronic disease. I think Bobby, the way I see it is he has a genetic predisposition to fight for the underdog. And, he has just fought in his life consistently for causes that have been forgotten, that are taboo, that people aren't paying attention to, starting with a lot of environmental causes where, frankly, the right disliked him more and the left loved him. I mean, he was supposed to be President Obama's EPA administrator. So he fought for a lot of causes that were popular on the left. And then, as he's talked about, he met sick children and children with autism and children that have been vaccine injured. And he took a focus on that because those kids were being forgotten. I mean, no matter what you think about the vaccine issue, obviously, a pharmaceutical product has complications, and things can be misformulated, or there's complications and injuries from every vaccine and every pharmaceutical product. That's not even a controversial opinion. Yep. So I think he did, take that issue on because those kids weren't being fought for. And that came from a much wider view of, wanting to unpack this callousness for the system about kids getting sick. Kids are, being overprescribed, medications. We've totally lost any moral clarity on what we're feeding our kids. The kids are too sedentary, the way we conduct schools. Kids are being besieged by chronic stress. There's a real spiritual crisis, as Bobby's talked about. And that has been, fighting for the underdog and fighting, for, children's health, fighting for people that don't have a voice is the defining thread of his life, that I think really does come strongly from his, father and uncle and, family history. So, I thought it was beyond the pale when you had senators attacking his motivations at the hearing. And, I really think we're in a bizarre situation where, Elizabeth Warren was excoriating him for having the tenacity to sue or question these poor pharmaceutical companies. I mean, it's just like, where are we right now when that's what Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are excoriating him for? We've totally lost the way.
Yeah, it's true. It goes deeper. I mean, there have been so many, going through COVID, I at first I was so discouraged, Calley, when we were going through COVID, at how many people sort of cowardly just decided to just throw in the towel, just go with, the recommendations, when I knew that this was going to destroy our health, and I knew that this was going to be probably the worst possible strategy we could have, with all of the lockdowns, with all of the hand sanitizers, with all of the masks, and all of the things that they decided to do. And I remember just feeling just discouraged that I guess I'd expected more of people. I'd expected more of our leaders. And then I will tell you, I've never been more proud. I am 4 years later now, of the amount of people that have stepped up, that have made radical changes in their perspectives. I mean, if I'm thinking about someone like Russell Brand or Joe Rogan or Jordan Peterson, or just a number of people who have really had a different shift in terms of what truth is, and actually saying, I want to discover truth, whether it's on the right or the left. I just want to know what the truth is, and I want to uncover the truth. And that has been so inspiring and encouraging to me that's happened. And I was talking to someone about this last night, and when we started chatting, this was the first thing that you and I discussed, is that if we were sitting 4 years ago and we would have said, Robert F. Kennedy, is going to be running HHS.
Right.
I would have said, I mean, the gambling odds in Vegas would have been 1 in a million, probably literally something like that. But here we are, here we are. If you've been doing everything right, eating clean, exercising, but somehow you're still not feeling your best, your energy's dragging, your memory is slipping, and it's frustrating because you know there's more to your potential. Well, what if the issue isn't just in your routine, but it's deep down inside your cells? You're investing in the best supplements, working out regularly, and sticking to a clean diet. But if your cells are stuck in what's called cell danger response, all the hard work might not be paying off as it should. Think of your cells like a house under renovation. You can bring in the highest quality materials like the best supplements and clean foods, but if the workers inside the house are on lockdown because of a storm, nothing gets done. The materials just pile up unused. That's what happens when your cells are in CDR. They can't fully use the good stuff you're giving them. Getting out of CDR, the cell danger response, is the key to unlocking your body's full potential. When your cells are no longer in protective mode, they can finally use the nutrients, hormones, and energy you're working so hard to provide. That's when everything starts to click. Your energy improves, your workouts become more efficient, and you start to feel like yourself again. Go to beyondbloodwork.com to learn how to break free from cell danger response and make the effort pay off.
Yeah, I think COVID is something we're going to unpack for a long time. I think COVID and our response and the ramifications are like, World War II level impact of like their impact on the country. Mm-hmm. And what's amazing, and I think what led to somebody like Bobby being able to resonate is, I think the arrogance of the medical system. It's like COVID was a total failure. I mean, like, from locking kids in the home and really setting a generation of developmental issues and depression among kids. That's like we're going to take a generation to unpack, to the lack of curiosity whatsoever about our immune systems and how COVID was a wake-up call for how we really have poor metabolic health and, frankly, just weak immune systems in the United States, where we were dying at 16% of worldwide COVID deaths in the United States with 4% of the world's population. And then Joe Rogan was called like a conspiracy theorist for saying that, COVID was tied to, what we eat and exercise and really, wasn't a big deal for people that were metabolically healthy, which was true, but he was totally vilified for that. I just it's just shameful that the media, talked about COVID as this pharmaceutical deficiency, is that all we need to do is to get the vaccine. It's the same way, we talk about chronic conditions. It's like, oh, just take the statin, take the metformin, take the Ozempic, we're all good. No, there's something much deeper that COVID exposed, which is that we have a metabolic health crisis, which we lost a generational opportunity to actually, rally the country. What if Dr. Fauci was rallying the country to like harden up our immune systems and talking about the interconnected kind of metabolic and chronic disease crisis that we have? That would have been an incredible opportunity. So we were totally misled, totally lied to. The public policy response was probably the biggest mistake in modern American history. And then we're still just bashed over the head to trust the science. And, we're still parents are called, criminals for questioning their doctor. And the lack of self-awareness in the medical system, even how they're responding to Bobby. I mean, you have these breathless announcements from universities about how dare they touch and alter in any way NIH funding. It's like NIH funding is failing. Like the goal of the NIH, the stated goal is to prevent and reverse disease and promote American health. Failed. And, they think these media articles saying that Bobby's attacking science are going to work. They're not. Like, science has failed. I've had a lot of off the record conversations with leaders in industry, with leaders in academia. It's like, and they're just like so up in arms about Bobby. I'm like, you need to have some self-awareness. Like, our system is working right now. Like, you have utterly failed. And the American people have formed a coalition to bring this as a voting issue that we need to dramatically change our health incentives because it's not working. We're the sickest country in the world. So the lack of self-awareness that the medical system still has is breathtaking, and it's not going to work. I mean, fire the bureaucrats, reform the NIH, reform the FDA, reform our medical codes. Obviously, that's what we need to do. And the risk is not going hard enough. The risk is not take a sledgehammer. We don't need a scalpel. This is not a scalpel issue. This is not an incremental issue. We need dramatic change. That's obvious.
Yeah, wow. I mean, yeah. I mean, you said it perfectly. I think that everything has to be changed from the ground up. One of the issues that I've always had, Calley, is that, when you think about other industries in terms of what works, like right now, our entire medical system is based off of disease, not off health. It's like if I were going to go and hire somebody to help me grow my wealth, I would hire a Warren Buffett, somebody who's actually studied wealth. They've actually done it themselves. They've built a big portfolio, right? They've had the success themselves. Today, our healthcare industry, it's not healthcare. It's disease care. It's like these people study sickness, not health. So they literally have no idea to get your health. One thing a lot of people don't realize is doctors will go through school, and I'm talking about every single doctor for the most part gets 0 classes in nutrition, 0 classes in lifestyle medicine, 0 classes in how to reduce stress, literally 0 classes in training in health. The only thing they're taught for the most part is how to diagnose a medical condition and how to prescribe a synthetic drug. That's the only thing they're trained to do. Now, thank God there have been some doctors who have decided to step outside of the box, like everyone, Mark Hyman and all kinds of people who have said, okay, I actually want to go and study health. But that's one of the issues even within our own government is like, okay, we're putting the people that are sick in charge of things. I mean, you have seen this if you're on social media. I know you've seen this. Is like, they're comparing our HHS secretary and the people leading our health over the past 5 years and how completely unhealthy they are. And then they've got a picture of Bobby in his 70s ripped with his shirt off doing push-ups, and it's like, well, there's a principle in the Bible and I love, and Jesus says this, by their fruit, you will recognize them. By their results, look at how they're living their own lives. Are they healthy? Okay, well, that's going to show you if you should trust them, if you should listen to them, if you should let them lead you. And that's something that the government has, and specifically healthcare, has absolutely, failed to do throughout its entire history. At least from what I know, the entire history of the American Medical Association has not truly ever been about healthcare, ever.
No, I mean, you're so right. And it's just a great point that the public health leaders that are lecturing us, Peter Hotez, it's like Joe Rogan kind of called it out. It's like, well, what are you eating? Like on a podcast with him, like, do you think food's important? And he's like, oh, I like the mouthfeel of donuts. And, it's just like all these people that are lecturing us are really clearly broken people from a health perspective. It seems like a mental health perspective. So that is kind of a gut test. You hit on the American Medical Association. I mean, this is really what the promise of Bobby is. It's like, and I think what we have a real opportunity to talk about as a country, no Americans have thought much about the American Medical Association, very few. And it's not really a hot topic. I mean, most people don't know about the CMS department, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services at the HHS. This is the largest department in government. It's actually the largest department of any government in the world. The Center for Medicare and Medicaid, which Dr. Oz is taking over, has a significantly higher budget than the entire Defense Department, just that one branch of HHS. They decide basically the standards of care that go into Medicare, Medicaid, and thus inform private insurance and basically the algorithm and the decision-making for our standard of care in the country. They fully outsource that decision-making to the American Medical Association, which is a shameful organization. It is a lobbying group for pharma, like literally. Wow. And there was no law that said we needed to outsource decision-making to them. They do not lobby for the health of Americans. They do not lobby for disease prevention or reversal. They lobby for more money that goes to doctors and pharmaceutical companies when they manage conditions, not prevent or reverse. Wow. So and it's amazing, right? See, we outsource to them, and then they outsource decision-making to specialty groups like the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Heart Association and the American Diabetes Association. Those groups are also pharma front groups. The American Academy of Pediatrics, the top funders are pharma, and another top funder is Abbott, which makes baby formula. They argue for baby formula, in some cases even better than breast milk. And they, totally promote this, medicalization of childhood. And also the guidance of nutrition is for kids, their first thing to eat is ultra-processed food, puffs, and not to avoid whole food. So, that's actually the standard of care that if a pediatrician goes against, they could risk losing their license. It's actually insane when you unpack this. So I think that's the real promise in the next couple of years is we actually just ask these basic questions and ask, does this stuff make sense?
Yeah, I mean, this is something, Calley, I don't think a lot of people realize that if a patient goes into a doctor today, an oncologist with, let's say, breast cancer, that doctor legally has to, in most cases, recommend that they get surgery and chemo.
Right.
I mean, they have to, or they can lose their license. And so, it's wild. We obviously saw this during COVID. If a doctor decided to prescribe ivermectin or hydrochloroquine or something like that, that they felt like they were seeing really good results with because of the research in other countries, that they lost their license or were threatened to. And so it's really sad. One of my hopes is that we are able to create a medical field where it's really truly this integrative functional medicine, to where when somebody goes into their doctor with, and this is the way that I think it should work. Somebody goes into their doctor with, let's call it high blood pressure and high cholesterol, that person first is prescribed turmeric and omega-3 fatty acids and magnesium, and a diet that's very high in, antioxidants like pomegranates and blueberries and wild fish, and you get it, with real food, extra virgin olive oils. Like that's the first thing, and more exercise and stress reduction techniques. And then after years, if it's still an issue, well, hey, then you get put on a medication, but we try and get you off it over time. I think maybe it's going to be a real challenge still with the way our entire medical system is set up financially. What do you think the best way is, or I guess, where is your mindset, where is Bobby's mindset when it comes to how do we actually fix the medical system to where, I don't truly believe that drugs should be primary care. They should be the secondary care. You should do lifestyle medicine, herbs, diet, vitamins, that first. And then it should be a drug only in the case of an emergency. Is that, how conscious of Bobby is that? Is that something he wants to be able to influence? I know he wants to affect the food industry, but how much does he actually want to get it in effect, this standard of care that you were just talking about?
That's the goal that we eventually get to. So I think there's two pillars to the strategy. The first is to get Americans the truth, to get corruption out of science, to have the right underlying science that informs our standard of care. So what science and our standard of care should do is guide to the most efficacious way to prevent and reverse disease. Like if we look at the $4.5 trillion we spend on medicine, it's not about whether it's drugs or food or whatever. It's like, okay, we've got this chronic disease crisis that's taking up 90% of medical costs, 90% of deaths. Can we have informed consent and correct information on how to best reverse and prevent those things? And obviously, that leads to more of a standard of care that is functional medicine, that is incentivizing lifestyle and food and exercise interventions, that's conducting more functional medicine blood tests before prescribing a pill, seeing if you have any nutrient deficiencies that can be handled. That's obviously the world that we would have, that frankly Europe has slightly better, of a standard of care. Again, not ideological towards what the treatment should be, but obviously heart disease is not a statin deficiency and obesity is not an ozempic deficiency. There's an underlying, more interconnected root cause. So I think the first step there that really is what his stated focus is, and what this executive order that Trump signed when Bobby was sworn in, about getting to the truth of why we're getting sick and getting corruption out of our agencies and getting an all hands on deck approach to figuring out why we're getting sick. That's really, really important, because when the science is there and the science is not corrupt and the science leads to that, then it inevitably informs the standard of care. So that's step one. Step two is to give Americans choice with where their healthcare dollars go. So right now in our fee-for-service model, we really are subject to the American Medical Association codes and algorithm, and we really have a sick care system where there's no curiosity about, underlying metabolic dysfunction. I always say I had a blood test a couple years ago, and the doctor said I was totally fine, and then I showed Casey, my sister, and she said, no, you have blaring underlying metabolic dysfunction that's going to be a serious problem. And if you don't reverse this quickly, you're going to be really sick. And I went back to the doctor and I'm like, is this true? They're like, oh yeah, totally. But you're not at the treatable level for cholesterol, the statin prescription yet. So we have nothing to do for you. That
Wow.
could all be, changed if we had more flexibility with where our healthcare dollars go. So Bobby has talked, and this is what I'm focused on with my company. I think it's a very important part of the medical system is like having more flexible funds, more HSA accounts.
Yeah.
Bobby said he wanted to make Medicare, Medicaid more flexible because right now on Medicaid, say you're a sick child, the top down basically essentially mandate is that if you're in a doctor's office and a little bit sad, you get an SSRI. Those, rates of those drugs are exploding among kids. If you have high cholesterol, get a statin. If you have high blood sugar, you get metformin. You're on your way. That's just incorrect clinically. And if, I think get away from the top down kind of codes and mandates and give, that mom on Medicaid more flexibility on where her medical dollars can go. So medicine doctor to do more blood tests. They could actually, potentially steer some of those medical dollars to food interventions. In Europe,
Yes.
if you have PCOS, infertility as a woman with leading cause of infertility, you get an insurance subsidized keto diet because PCOS is insulin resistance and can be dramatically reversed, by cutting carbs essentially. That's not talked about in the United States. We have no flexibility to steer money to that. We just shove hormone pills down a woman's throat and then, on a quick road to IVF, which should be available. But I think most women would prefer to understand the root cause of their issue and be able to explore how to reverse that. So that's the two steps, Josh, is get the science right, which inevitably then informs the standard of care, and then give patients more autonomy over determining the best route for them with their doctor. Theoretically, if you had Medicare or Medicaid not be this whole fee-for-service model subject to the AMA codes, but a flexible pot of funds, you'd see a rush of money to more functional treatments, which patients are paying, billions and billions of dollars for now out of pocket. We need to incentivize those more root cause interventions.
Yeah, I love that you're sharing that. And I think here's the thing. Government needs to listen to what the people want. I mean, I can tell you every single person listening to this podcast right now is saying to themselves, you know what? Right now, my insurance covers me to go and get prescribed an antibiotic or SSRI or whatever drug, and it'll cover that. What it won't cover is my hyperbaric chamber, my vitamin IVs, the supplements I want to take monthly, some of the healthy foods I want to start getting. Imagine if your insurance, it covered your vitamins and minerals and supplements and red light therapy, all that stuff that you want. There's not a single person who doesn't desperately want that. Not a single person. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about too, you mentioned your company a few times. I know one of the things that you and your sister have company levels, and you guys are very conscious of this continuous blood glucose monitoring. And by the way, I want to mention this. I've done so many medical tests just because I'm curious, and I also have recommended them to patients over the years. And one of my top 3 tests that I've ever had people do, and it might be my number 1, is a continuous blood glucose test. Because, the fact that you can tell what's going on with your blood sugar in real time and insulin along with cortisol, those are the 2 hormones, that when those get thrown off, it's like a domino effect for tipping off metabolic disease and almost every health issue in your body. So to be able to know what's going on with your insulin, to where every food you eat, the way you sleep, certain activities, you can tell what that's doing in real time to your blood sugar, is so beneficial. Tell us a little bit more about this technology and some of the results you've seen, or some of the eye-opening things that you've discovered as you and your sister have work. And I do also want to get into the other company you're working with, which is on the HSA account side. But would you share a little bit more about sort of metabolic dysfunction and blood sugar?
Yeah. So Levels is I would love to take credit as just my sister's company. But it's an amazing company, and my company is TrueMed, which enables HSA, FSA spending for food and exercise. But yeah, I mean, I think this is the world that we can incentivize and move towards. I mean, until actually the FDA changed their opinion, I think last year, but until last year, they actually discouraged non-diabetic Americans from using a CGM. They still discourage preventative cancer screenings. There's been a total stranglehold of the FDA on any type of preventative screening. Now, I don't think everyone at the FDA, it's evil, but I think it is kind of almost an evil, invisible hand that's preventing Americans from understanding, their bioobservability and understanding what's going on in their body. We talk about in the book, our kind of talking point is you know much more about what's going on in your car with all the gauges than your body. There's been this weird kind of stranglehold at the FDA where the only therapeutics that get through are like to manage, disease once you already get it. There's no incentives through our regulatory systems to encourage innovation on understanding we're getting sick. I mean, clearly the world we're trying to build, the world we can incentivize, a better world for health, is that people have more understanding of their biomarkers, from insulin resistance, obviously related to glucose, to their ketones, to their hydration levels, these real-time understanding of both what's going on inside their body and what they should do to thrive. I think there's a real world that we can get to that. And AI, there's downsides and plus sides, but we're in an incredible moment of innovation where we, theoretically every American can have the most, preventative focused functional medicine doctor in their pocket, giving them actionable ideas every day based on their personal biomarkers. I mean, that's a good world that we can get to. And, as you said, yeah, glucose and understanding that, it's so important because, Casey and I talking about in the book, metabolic dysfunction is the tree, or excuse me, is the base of the tree that really leads to 90% of medical costs and 9 out of 10 causes of American death. The problem with the medical system, in our view, is that you basically wait for the symptoms of metabolic dysfunction and then treat those in silos. If you have diabetes, heart issues, Alzheimer's, which is now called type 3 diabetes, kidney issues, depression, which is highly tied to metabolic dysfunction too, you're seeing 5 different doctors with 5 different treatment plans. Really, you can actually solve the root cause, that base. And, if you look at the definition of metabolic dysfunction, it's HDL levels, triglyceride levels, blood sugar, blood pressure, and your weight and your obesity levels. If you get those 5 biomarkers under control, you have, by definition, don't have diabetes, which is blood sugar. You almost certainly don't have cardiology or heart issues. You almost certainly won't get dementia, which is highly on the same level as diabetes, respiratory issues, kidney issues. If you go down the list of American illnesses, if you can optimize those 5 biomarkers, you have a 0 or close to 0 chance of many of them, including cancers, which are highly metabolic linked in many cases. But again, our system is, my mom gets cancer after being on 5 different other, chronic disease medications, and they say it's tough luck. It's not tough luck. My mom would still be here if she was empowered to have more understanding about what's going on in her body and more of a process to get those biomarkers under control. So that's the promise of what's happening now is in the next 10 years, we get to a system where I think health is more outside the doctor's office, quite frankly. I think we should be at the doctor's office for acute issues. The system's a miracle for acute issues. I mean, if we, get a broken bone or an appendix issue or a complicated childbirth or, need some kind of emergency surgery, 100%, the system's a miracle. But the problem is that's 7% of the budget right now. Like very little of the healthcare spending is on those acute issues. It's all on chronic. We need to get chronic outside of this medicalization treadmill and towards giving people more information. The other thing, Josh, is I think Bobby really talked about is Americans want to be healthy. There's this idea that, Americans don't want that information, or Americans, are just going to make bad decisions. I don't think that's true. Yeah. It's a free country. People, still make bad decisions, but, they lived 7 years longer than Americans in Italy. And I always say, we're not lazier than the Italians. There's something that's wrong with our incentives.
Today's episode is brought to you by waveblock.com, your go-to resource for EMF protection. Did you know that wireless devices emit radiation that can negatively impact your health? WaveBlock offers lab-tested and verified stickers that reduce EMF exposure on AirPods, cell phones, iPads, and MacBooks without compromising performance. They're simple to apply, effective, and deliver peace of mind. Visit waveblock.com to learn more and use the code AXE, that's AXE, at checkout for a special discount. Join tens of thousands of people, including myself, in using WaveBlock for protection. You'll be glad you did it. I'm excited for the health and protection this is going to bring to you and your family. Myself, my wife Chelsea, and all of my patients I encourage to use WaveBlock to protect themselves from radiation from devices. Yeah, it's so true. You know, one of the things I don't think people realize, Calley, and you and your sister did a good job covering this in your book, Good Energy. But you talked about how it's not like just diabetes is the issue that's linked to this metabolic disease. You've mentioned several things so far. You mentioned PCOS and infertility being a major cause. You mentioned cardiovascular disease. You mentioned, of course, obesity and weight gain. You mentioned Alzheimer's and dementia. But there's even issues like, you know, I was diagnosed with ADHD growing up, and there's research around that. There's mental health. And so, you know, I think that if this were fixed, and this was one of the biggest things that we were able to really look at, that, you know, you're going to see the decline so quickly of disease and the increase of lifespan, as you mentioned, countries like Japan and Italy, who have much longer lifespan than us. Here's my question for you: is where do we need to start in terms of, and what are some of the steps that we need to take in order to make that a reality, to start to truly fix the metabolic illness and start to, start to help people to heal and promote longevity?
We need to understand that Americans listen to the medical system and listen to doctors. When the medical system makes a point strongly, Americans listen, for better or worse. You know, when the Surgeon General said smoking was bad, smoking rates plummeted. When we said that the food pyramid, you know, was the way to go, the American diet dramatically shifted to carbs. You know, when the medical system said we need to lock down the country during COVID, immediately we listened. When they say we need to give our kids 72 shots and not ask any questions, most people do that. When they said we needed to take the COVID vaccine, most people did that. Like for better or worse, like the medical system has a lot of power. So I cannot stress enough how, if there's one victory for Bobby in the next 4 years, it's getting control of science. I really believe that President Trump, at the end of this term, the goal should be for him to win the Nobel Prize for finally getting the NIH back to foundational science, to be asking, you know, questions about why people are getting Alzheimer's, why people are getting diabetes, why people are getting heart disease. I can't stress that enough. The NIH is not currently asking why. They're asking, how do we profit from these conditions going up? It's a very important distinction. So if we have the underlying science, which inevitably leads to the idea and a redefinition of chronic disease care, of that these issues are interconnected, not siloed, and then if that research informs more flexibility and where healthcare dollars can go, again, Americans want to be healthy. They're being lied to, and then their medical incentives are not allowing them to go on a path of curiosity with functional medicine doctors. So we just have to really support Bobby and President Trump in getting corruption out of our scientific agencies and getting really good science, quite frankly. I mean, science has been captured by industries that, as a demonstrable statement of economic fact, profit from people being sick. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So we just need to, you know, I'm kind of, this is such a big issue, and I'm even agnostic about what we do when. I just think we need constant wins. You know, we've got a list of 300 things that we're, you know, working on, but it's like,
well, you know, I'm encouraged so far because a lot of action has been taken. I mean, can you ever remember in your lifetime somebody stepping into the presidency, or even looking at what Bobby's doing now, and people taking so much action so fast?
I think it's amazing. I mean, you know, we're getting into, you know, politics is a tough game, and I'm sure listeners have different opinions. But you know, the American people currently are on the side of fast action. And I think what voters voted for, and I think even if you didn't vote for President Trump, I think most people can agree there's real systemic problems with our institutions. And these institutions are really built to resist change, and they're entrenched. we have real problems with all of our major institutions, from the military industrial complex to schools, and education, where kids are not becoming more competitive, but budgets are growing, to healthcare, where we're spending more and getting less healthy. So I think it's going to be messy. And, with these firings, there's going to be people probably fired that are good people, but like the risk is moving too slow, not too fast. We need to have constant wins for the system. And that's I think what you're going to see from Bobby. You're going to be seeing a steady stream of action to replace personnel, to reform conflicts of interest at the FDA and CMS and NIH, to end the revolving door where 11 out of the past 12 FDA administrators went straight to pharma, to end the co-option of our various institutions like pharmaceutical ads on TV, which don't require enough disclaimers. There's a clear constitutional precedent for patients being informed correctly. And in 1997, they actually lessened the disclosures that are needed on pharma ads so they could be shorter and go on TV. And that's been obviously a disaster where patients haven't been informed, where we're the most medicated country in the world and the sickest. So you can just go down the list of a lot of wins that I think have American support. When you get to food, it's, GRAS standards. Why do we have these food dyes that were waved in with no scrutiny, and 10,000 other chemicals? Why do we have self-policing of food? Why do the USDA nutrition guidelines recommend added sugar for 2-year-olds? Yeah. You could just go down the list, and I think just execute a ton of popular wins.
It's some of those recommendations, just hearing you say them, are just wild. It's just wild. I mean, in the breastfeeding versus the formula. I mean, there are so many. They're absolute insanity. And I wanted to mention one other thing that I think is the root of the issue, and I think President Trump knows this, is that there's a famous quote by Confucius, and it's literally one of my favorite quotes of all time, and it says this. It says, if your plan is for 1 year, plant rice. If your plan is for 10 years, plant trees. If your plan is for 100 years, educate children. And today, when I think about like what I learned in school, which by the way, it's 100 times worse now, what kids learn in school. I mean, they're like, I never took a nutrition class. I never learned about how to spend money. I never built how to have good relationships. It's like, I learned calculus, which I've never used since, but I didn't learn the basic principles of eating fruits and vegetables and organic food and those sort of things. I never learned that at all. And I was really encouraged to see them go after the Department of Education, because obviously that's another area that's failing. I mean, there's so many government areas that are just absolutely failing right now. But to me, that's another thing is, and this goes along with what you shared in terms of, if the government recommends something, essentially it's a minor way of teaching or recommending something, people listen. And I think that's another thing. And this is where I got discouraged around COVID a little bit too, is I did a podcast and I went through, hey, there's this new virus. Here's what you need to do. Vitamin D, zinc, vitamin C, quercetin, you know, all the things. Here's the exact foods to eat. And then I had an article written about me that I was anti-science. And I thought, what are you talking about? I'm quoting and because it wasn't specific to COVID. And, but anyways, all that being said, I was encouraged to see them going after the Department of Education, because I think that's another thing. We may not feel that for the next, even 4 years, but 50 years from now or 10 years from now, that's going to make a difference too. And I think, it's going to be hard to fit all this in 4 years. I mean, so much needs to happen, but obviously getting it started is going to be, I'm excited to see the progress so far.
Well, I think it's important for MAHA supporters to, there's a lot, this is a new powerful coalition in American politics with a lot of different issues people come from it on, it's tough to build a new political coalition. This has really happened. I think we need dramatic change very quickly, but I do think it's like, again, I'm agnostic to what happens when. I think what the real victory here is that we change culture and change consciousness and change the way these health systems operate to a more preventative, disease reversal, freedom of speech mindset where it can't go back. A dean of a med school told me recently that, he explained very forthrightly and honestly, I thought, he said, everyone at the faculty lounge thinks Bobby is a wacko. And if Bobby resets NIH incentives to, prioritize more foundational preventative research, they're going to kick and scream, but they're going to have to submit the grants, for that new incentive. And if that can maintain, then in 4 to 6 years, Bobby's gone. But if that trajectory holds and, the incentives for research are more slanted to prevention, then in 4 to 6 years, it's just going to be the norm. And nobody's really going to be talking about Bobby, and nobody's going to really be complaining. It's just going to be like, this is how things are done. And we have a frog in boiling water, where I think most people don't even realize how messed up our system is right now, where we're not studying why people are getting sick. We're studying how to profit from disease. It's almost just like it's so normalized that people don't get it. Our battle right now is to change the culture, and really push right now through the criticism to establish the norm that the goal of the medical system is to prevent and reverse disease. So we got to move fast and gotta. I feel like once you see these things, you can't go back, right? If Bobby's able to, get soda off of SNAP, or, it's not going to be popular for somebody to put soda back on SNAP, food stamps, things like that. I think if we can win right now, they're going to have a hard time reversing those wins.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that, and I think, people are so much more educated on health now. They can find information themselves. I think that's part of what sort of tipped the scales. Again, I think that when you and I met up with Vani Hari and Jason Karp and Alex Clark and Courtney Swan and Will Cole, just so many of those amazing people that we met up with, Aman, just so many of those amazing people we met up with in Michigan to stand outside Kellogg's headquarters because they're putting these food dyes and BHT and all these chemicals in our food supply. I think that those sort of things where we're banding together and this information's being distributed on social media, it's waking people up. And that's one of the things I will say COVID did to people. It woke people up. It either woke them up, or they kind of took their ideology and the lie and they decided to kind of hunker down with that even more out of poor character. But I think so many people were able to wake up. I mean, I'm amazed at people like, again, Joe Rogan's such a great example of this. It's like he woke up. Again, I mentioned Russell Brand, like even spiritually, it's like he woke up. There's all of and he was already awake in certain instances, but there's a lot of people that were awoken by this. And switching gears here a little bit, I think that you mentioned the word radical with Bobby. That's what we need right now. We need to continue this sort of radical awakening by getting the truth out there. And that's the thing. When people actually see the truth, enough people hold on to it and they'll run with it. And just like it happened during COVID. I mean, we've seen so much radical change over the last 4 years, actually for the good now, because of the evil that was COVID, which just actually ended up exposing the truth. What is, I'd love to hear this from you. What is one radical idea that maybe you personally have about food, health, metabolism that more people need to hear today? Maybe some people aren't ready for it, but what is one radical idea that people need to, that would be powerful for people to awaken to?
That if we fired every single nutrition researcher in the country and literally had no nutrition guidelines other than eat whole food, that we'd be in a dramatically better place. I think we overcomplicated, and I think there's a lot of incentives even for folks on podcasts to talk about this diet, the low carb or this or that. It's like there are societies that eat higher carbs, but it's whole food.
Yeah.
And there are societies that eat more meat, and there's societies that I think we're being mass confused about food. And I've been amazed by the reception of Good Energy, where we have kind of simple principles, and I thought they were kind of really basic and kind of obvious. I'm like, to the editor, I'm like, is this really that interesting? I want to write a more kind of nuanced book. They're like, no, this is interesting. And then thousands of people are like, wow, that's like I use the shopping list now. I use the principles now, and it's really resonated. I think people are clamoring for simplicity. So I think, I personally truly believe that the nutrition guidelines, which are currently 450 pages, I think they could be like a half page or less and say eat whole foods.
Yes.
I just think, I don't think people understand how compromised food that's processed is. I don't think we fully understand that. It's because it's truly weaponized, truly, literally weaponized. The chemicals are designed by scientists to make us want to eat more and hijack our evolutionary biology. And then when you're able to do things from food, these companies have no scruples, and it just has all these chemicals that aren't even labeled in many cases that have the benefit for the food companies of making the food more addictive and cheaper, but are really hijacking our evolutionary biology to make us want to eat more and impacting our metabolic health and microbiome. I don't think we have even the tip of the iceberg of the research on like how all these chemicals are impacting our gut, which impacts a lot of our hormones. So that would be something I would really push for. I think the nutrition guidelines will probably be a bit more expansive than a couple words, but I think we'd be a much healthier country if literally we just ate whole foods.
Yeah. Here's another radical idea that I think that I could get some pushback on. I believe that if we had 80 to 90% of all drugs just disappeared overnight, and 80, 90% of hospitals, literally in doctors' offices, just shut down, we would live longer and be much, much healthier.
That's true.
Yeah.
I think that's obvious. I think that is a controversial statement. I think that thought experiment's really interesting. I actually think the medicalization of chronic disease has been a net negative. I agree with that. I think all of the statins and the metformin and all these like steps along the way, which we spent trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars on, cancer treatments. I think the ROI on that has been negative. I mean, if you look at life expectancy and Peter Tia, the first graph in his book, is that if you take out infectious and acute conditions like infections and just have basically, there's been no life expectancy increase in the past 100 years. Like all the life expectancy increase has been through infectious and acute issues, and then chronic disease has actually dragged it down. So there's just a massive, incalculable opportunity cost of our medicalization of chronic disease because we spend over $4 trillion a year on it, and it's producing higher rates of the disease. There's never been a chronic disease medication I can point to that's lowered rates of the chronic disease. Statins, more heart disease, SSRIs, more depression. And people say, well, that you can't really, that's just correlate. It's like, no, these drugs are moral hazards. They're lying to the patient, thinking that they're taking an action for that condition and have done something, but they haven't done something. They're masking the symptoms, but they're actually not doing anything to reverse not only that condition, but the underlying metabolic dysfunction that will lead to more conditions. So I think that's a great take.
But paint a picture for me. We're 8 to 10 years from now. What do you think it's all going to look like when we're talking about if HSA accounts are going to be, people are going to be able to use that for, whatever they want in terms of true healthcare? What's it going to look like? The food industry, the pharmaceutical industry, what do you think things are going to look like in 10 years?
The optimistic picture in 10 years is that actually healthcare companies and food companies are doing much better and making a lot of money because the incentives for those companies is to promote thriving of Americans, is to promote disease reversal and to promote longevity. I think the core goal of the next 10 years is that through corporate capture, our systems are incentivized to manage disease. You can create economic incentives where we have companies incentivized to prevent and reverse disease and to contribute to measurable increases in health span and lifespan for Americans. If we have a food and health system that is working together and incentivized to increase American life and increase American happiness and increase American health, then that's the top input to the economy you could possibly have. And there's massive economic value there. Because if you can extend American life and make Americans more productive and happy, then you're producing more in the economy, most likely. So I mean,
some of this is basic psychology. It's it's reward systems.
That's it. To me, that is it. To me, it is, does our healthcare system and food system work together where food is more tied to the healthcare system to incentivize longevity and incentivize disease prevention and reversal? Like, to me, that is all we need to do. Like The system right now is not incentivized that way. Americans are going to make good decisions if the incentives are right. So we've lost our way in our healthcare incentives now. All we need to do is ensure people make money when the right outcomes happen, and the rest will take care of itself.
That's so good. That's so good and so true. One of the things that you guys cover in your book, and you talk a little about it, is certain foods, certain nutrients to have great energy. When you're kind of looking at, and again, one of the things I really appreciate about you is you've got a real big picture perspective, Calley. And I think that some people, you've got a scientist, you've got doctors, a lot of times they're in the weeds looking at these small details, but you're kind of standing back looking at the big picture. You've worked in the food industry, you've worked in government, you've run companies that are really, that are completely related to what we're discussing. What are some of the most underrated, maybe nutrients or foods or treatments that people are missing today that maybe they're unaware of?
Yeah, I mean, my question really to that question, I go to, it's a personalized journey for everyone. And the first chapter of our recommendations in the book is to really understand your blood tests. And, I'm a huge proponent of, various companies like Function Health and or just going to a functional medicine doctor and getting a deep understanding, a nuanced understanding what's happening in your body. Because, frankly, everyone, who's suffering from a chronic condition most likely has some kind of specific nutrient deficiency or microbiome issue or low-grade autoimmune condition or what have you. So, I think, highest level we recommend, I think we're deficient in vitamin D, omega-3s, are two really important ones. And generally, I think most people would be well advised to take. I think most people would be well advised to take a strong multivitamin. But once you get from there, I think it's having a personalized view inside your body to create, a personalized strategy. I mean, I think every American should be getting incentivized to get a functional medicine blood test. And then the future of medicine is with that information and with more like levels and biowearables to have a more personalized nutrient supplementation system, which can definitely include food too. I mean, some of the best supplements are, eating a steak or, the best source of these nutrients and antioxidants, all the things we're taking supplements for are often in food. So that's the world we really recommend and would like to see. And what we recommend in the book is get an understanding of your own body and what's happening inside your body with a functional medicine blood test, and then create a customized plan for yourself.
I think it's so good. I think, one of the things I know that I'm very much on board with is personalized medicine. This goes all back thousands of years ago, even to Chinese medicine and Ayurveda and Greek medicine, in terms of looking at and recommending what your unique body needs. And so I love that. And I think sort of, I love when sort of the wisdom of the past, when science catches up, right? I mean, this is just, this happens all the time. It's like, Chinese medicine or Ayurveda has been saying something for 4,000 years. And then today we're like, hey, we had this discovery, right? You should combine turmeric with black pepper. Well, that's turmeric golden milk. That recipe is 3,500 years old. So anyways, it's, there's a lot of just common sense. There's a lot of things that we need to do. But again, I think personalized medicine absolutely is the future of where we're headed, and so I mean, it's amazing. I think right now, like I've got an Oura ring on, and I love being able to track my sleep, see my HRV. I mean, that's incredibly important. Again, I love the continuous blood glucose monitors from Levels, and have recommended those to so many patients. So I love the real time, and I think we're going to be 10 years from now, and we're going to be able to not only read our blood sugar metrics, but also to be able to look at what vitamins and minerals and where our hormones are. I mean, and have an app be able to tell us, this is what you should eat this next meal. Here's the supplements you should take. And so I think we're going to be 10 years from now. I'm very, very optimistic, as you are, in terms of, the leaders that are in place now, the changes that are going to be made. And I'm also just really encouraged because there are so many leaders like yourself and your sister that are on the front lines. They're fighting for the good of society and wanting to make a difference. And so, Calley, I want to say, man, thanks so much for coming on today. And I want to encourage everybody to check out, Calley has an incredible book. It's called Good Energy. I think it was a New York Times bestseller. It's in bookstores nationwide. Again, it's called Good Energy. And the book takes the science of metabolic issues and really brings it down into the very essence and in a simple plan of here's how to truly heal metabolic illness. And so I want to encourage you guys, check out the book, Good Energy. And Calley, would you tell us a little bit about your company as well? And again, everybody should be a massive fan of this company that Calley has, that is around having you be able to take your own money and actually put that towards the healthcare that you truly want.
Yeah, we asked, we talked about what the future of healthcare looks like, and it's where Americans have flexibility in their healthcare dollars and can work with their doctor to the most efficacious treatment, which is often exercise, supplementation, and food. There's one area of the healthcare system where you can actually do that right now, which is HSA, FSA dollars, these flexible accounts that the majority of Americans have. And what TrueMed.com does is we facilitate medical interventions, asynchronous, very quick, a couple minutes, to assess whether items like Peloton, supplementation, gym memberships, metabolic health items count for HSA, FSA by determining with a third-party doctor whether those items can help prevent or reverse a condition. So if you have a doctor's note explaining that a gym membership could prevent or reverse a condition that you're working through, like from depression to anxiety to PCOS to prediabetes, et cetera, then that counts for tax-free spending. So this year we'll hit 1 million patients, 1 million Americans that we've helped. We facilitated medical interventions to help them use tax-free dollars towards root cause items.
Wow, amazing. And guys, that's TrueMed.com. That's just TRUEMED, TrueMed.com. I want to encourage you guys to check it out. And I want to just say, Calley, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom for us today. Thanks so much for being on the front lines and fighting for the MAHA, the Make America Healthy Again movement. And I'm so grateful for you. And everybody want to say thanks so much for tuning in here to the Dr. Axe Show. Hey, remember, each and every week we're diving deep into the science and principles behind how you can experience a breakthrough physically, mentally, spiritually, and taking your health and your life to the next level. Hey, there are millions of people right now that don't know the truth of what Calley is teaching, about what Robert F. Kennedy is teaching. Do us a favor, share this episode out there. We're so grateful for all of you that are on mission sharing this. Also, don't forget to subscribe. We've got so many other amazing guests and content coming out here soon. Again, thanks to Calley. And I want to mention, if you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment. Let us know what you believe the future of healthcare looks like. Let us know something, maybe a piece of wisdom that Calley shared, something you didn't know, like the cigarette companies are tied to the food companies, or that's part of what it was birthed from. So let us know your thoughts there in the comments section as well. Hey, thanks so much for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.